life situations whereupon it will all be analyzed, assessed, and we are capable of getting the perfect results, and we, prior to that execution itself as such, we are at a verge whereupon we can say that whether how the building is going to perform and how it is not. Today, of course, we are talking about the concept of a digital twin, which would have immense potential. The point to make here is, this is the advancement that is going to happen. Now, when we are talking about artificial intelligence and its interface with architecture as such, then we have to understand there are so many of the things which are going to happen. So when we are talking about the fusion, we are talking about the cities, and we are talking about the architecture as such, I am also talking about the education for that matter. Gone are the days whereupon we would be saying that this has to be of 5 years. But as a president, I am doing a very responsible statement. We are trying to evaluate as to how actually this education is to happen. Is it going to be 5 years? Could this be given as the capsules as it is happening today? Because the young generation actually is interested in capsules. Are we capable of producing the capsules of architecture, education? If at all, I mean, the answer could be no. But that answer is not a well-studied answer. Because you have to dwell between the possibilities. And there is a possibility whereupon with the national education policy and whatever the progress which is happening around as such, we are talking about anyone and everyone should be capable of entering into any field, not only architecture, any field. This was not a possibility at some point of time. Today this becomes absolutely possible. Inclusiveness of the education. We are talking about the multiple entries and the multiple exits. Because we are talking about, as a national education policy, we are talking about student-centric learning processes which could be almost customized for every individual needs. This was not the approach. So it is not a straight line education. We cannot talk about now a centralized standard syllabi. No. Every school is going to have its own way of teaching learning processes. What could be finally controlled is the product. Different approach altogether. How to teach? That we were talking about, that linear progression. फर्स्ट ईयर जब तक ये नहीं होता है तब तक ये सेकंड ईयर नहीं हो पाएगा, उसके बाद में थर्ड ईयर होगा, उसके बाद ये भी इस also may not work. And that's why that concept of a credit bank happening around. Whatever you do something as such that goes into a credit bank as such, and then the university would or an autonomous body would look at it, saying that whatever you have actually earned, whether that suits to provide the degree or not. This is going to happen in majority of the cases as such. The problem may come with certain areas, like for example, the medical education may have a problem, or there could be some others also. One-third of your existing syllabus, if you look at it as such, whereupon you have the subjects which are information-based subjects, this could be left to the students. Only the evaluation could be taken care of. But they can learn because you have a very strong way of, having the e-medias, learning progressions, the best of the possible of the professors, putting it up across, and everyone would have an opportunity to learn some subject from Professor Nilchand Chaya for that matter. So when Professor Nilchand Chaya is available to deliver on something as such, you don't require Abhay Purohit to deliver on it. And everyone should be capable of getting from the best person. Now, if that is what is happening around, the limit was a physical limit. That physical limit is now sort of almost removed. And with the technology it is possible, then why not? Such is a thought process which is happening around. Multitasking is going to be a name of the game. The clerical scenarios in whatever format would actually be completely removed. Completely removed. There would be no need, because we have seen ChatGPT, what it is capable of performing today. That is only 1% what we are seeing. That is the tip of the iceberg. If you look at the capabilities, the real capabilities are something which are going to be multifold. And that's why I quoted, I talked about that example. Computer which came, that first desktop, 32 KB was the hard disk. If you understand what it means, 32 KB. Today, when you talk about the GBs, those were 32 KBs. What you are seeing today as artificial intelligence is only the glimpses of it. This naturally would take out a lot of need of a repetitive sort of the knowledge which is going to come. Now what we are going to talk about essentially as a human quality is a wisdom. And we have to understand the difference between the knowledge and the wisdom. Human brains and human scales would actually focus on the wisdom, because achieving wisdom is going to be pretty difficult. That humanness is going to be pretty difficult for the artificial intelligence in whatever format. Because the emotions would not be generated, emotions are something to be felt about. A good speaker looks at the crowd and the group which is being to be addressed and would be adjusting his or her speech according to it. Possibly, artificial intelligence, enabled sort of the systems may not be capable of doing that kind of thing. So we are talking about a very, very advanced sort of a world and the challenges you look at it, and that would link with your topic. And I was telling someone that out of the 10 programs which I attend, 5 to 6 programs are basically talking about the sustainability in this format or that format. Yesterday also I was in discussions with someone, and they were talking about the water as something which is going to go off completely, as it is. Population explosion is an advantage on one side, but at the same point of time, we have to think about what kind of infrastructure development would be needed as such, and what kind of resources would be taken out. And if you try to link it with the groundwater availability as such, you know that at what depth it is going on and what is the scarcity of water. This is only one resource. One also has to start thinking whether the bricks which we are considered as one of the very, very good material as such, and the burned bricks as such, if we want to build that kind of the communes, would you afford to have burned bricks whereupon the soil is completely lost? The quality of a soil to reproduce lost. And what it talks about essentially is a new set of a technology. It talks about a new set of a material. It talks about a new set of the considerations. And whatever we are doing today is going to be history very, very rapidly. Very rapidly. And this is what we have to understand. This is how we have to adjust ourselves and recalibrate ourselves so that we remain relevant. But your generation, the new generation, has a tremendous advantage, because what you are going to see is the development which has not been seen by anyone else. We are becoming the third economy, and possibly we are going to be in that as such. We are the country with the youngest population, and this trend is going to continue for another 30 years at least. And what statistics shows and what projections are telling us is that it is basically every decade we are going to have one equivalent of USA, building wise, infrastructure wise, because we have soon started. And that is a need which we have to address too. And I would put, I keep on, at the cost of repetition as such, I keep on telling everywhere, that when we project what is the need of the architects, as such, we have to understand and realize that the developed countries have a ratio of 1:3,000 to 1:5,000. Population to architect ratio. Today, our population, if you look at it, 140 CR plus. Our architects, number of architects registered with Council of Architecture, 1.5 lakh. Even if I consider 1:10,000 as a ratio, we require 10 times more architects as of date. Now this is something which has to be understood. And equally, I am not only talking about architecture as such. If you look at it, the need of the design need also is actually very much there. Because अभी तो हम शुरू करने जा रहे हैं. And if that has to be done as such, then it has to be done in a very, very proper fashion. If we want to be world leader, as per vision of our Honorable Prime Minister, and we are achieving that, and we are going very fast on that track. We also have to be very, very clear that it is basically the physical infrastructure, facilities, the aesthetical qualities associated with it, plays a very, very important role. Because any country basically is known or visualized, first impression would happen because of the infrastructure and the facilities and the aesthetical qualities which we are putting up. So gone are the days whereupon we would say that हाँ कुछ तो कर देंगे, ये भी करेंगे, वो भी करेंगे, ऐसा भी चलता है, वैसा भी चलता है, नहीं चलता है, ऐसे नहीं होने वाला है, नहीं होगा. Everything has to fall in a sort of a very, very clear-cut understanding that this is what we want to achieve and this is what has to be done. And your generation is going to get that advantage because you are going to see that golden era of Indian civilization, and you as the architects are going to be contributors. I am very sure that this dais would see a lot of meaningful discussions happening around. That is going to be beneficial to you all, and we all would be learning our lessons through that in terms of at least broadening our vision. My best wishes to you all. Jai Hind, Jai Maharashtra.
We request Sir to please come on the stage for the felicitation. We request Principal Meera Maligakar, Professor Tanya Shah and Assistant Professor Uzma Khan, APIC coordinators, to come on the stage for the felicitation. sir. Thank you, ma'am. Joining us is the accomplished Neelkan Chaya, an architect, academician with nearly 4 decades of experience. He taught at CEP University, Ahmedabad, from where he retired as the Dean of Faculty of Architecture in 2013. Subsequently, he has been an adjunct faculty at Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology, Bangalore, where he holds the UNESCO Chair in Sustainability, Heritage and Livelihoods. He has participated in many international and national conferences in the field of architecture and urban habitation. Over the last few years, he has coordinated the Gandhi Heritage Sites documentation project. His practice has won several national design awards and competitions. He is the first recipient of the Balakrishna Doshi Guru Ratna Award instituted in 2023. We request sir to please come on the stage and say a few words.
Yeah, after that rousing talk, I'm going to be a little quiet and sense what is happening around us. What I'm going to talk about today will not have any pictures. There will be only words. But I hope that I don't bore you. I'll try not to. So a few days ago, I read a book called Breeding Sweet Grass. Breeding means breeding. Sweet grass. It's written by a North American indigenous woman who is a tribal elder, but she is also a professor of botany in one of the universities in Canada. So I'll tell you the creation story of the North American indigenous people. Just to begin our thing. So, once there was only water and there was no land, and all the creatures either swam in the water or flew above. And one day in the sky there opened up a hole, and the hole brought down a shaft of light through which Sky Woman fell. Sky Woman. She fell, and as she was falling, she had a bundle in her hands. Nobody knew what that was. But she was falling, and she would have drowned in the water. But the geese, birds, they flapped their wings and they caught her. But she was heavy. The geese could not keep on holding her. Finally, the turtle who was in the water said, I will stay half out of the water, and on the dome of my back, let her sit. So, Sky Woman was put on the turtle's back. And they realized that she couldn't be forever on the turtle. There was a need for earth. There was only water and sky. There was need for water. Of course, earth. So all the animals knew that deep down in the water there was some mud. And one by one, the animals, the big ones, the powerful ones, the great, strong ones, tried to dive in and bring up some mud. They all failed. I hope you are interested in stories. So they all failed. All the big animals, all the powerful animals, all the animals with a lot of strength, they failed. They couldn't bring mud. Then one small mouse came up and said, please let me try. And they said, look, you are so small, you won't be able to survive. If you go so deep, you will be crushed by the pressure. He said, please let me try. So reluctantly, they allowed him to dive into the water. A few minutes later, some bubbles came out of the water. And at last, the body of the small mouse floated up. And they saw that he was clutching something in his hands. And when they opened the hands, they were all, of course, very sad that the mouse had gone. But they opened the hands, there was little bit of mud. And so they took that mud and they plastered it on the turtle's back. And Sky Woman immediately started singing. As she sang, the soil increased, soil increased, soil increased, till now the whole earth was created. And she opened her bundle and she had brought seeds of all kinds. And she threw the seeds and tended to them till the whole earth was green. And then animals came, birds came, all creatures found food. And that is the story of Sky Woman and the earth. Now in opposition to that, we have another story of the Garden of Eden, in which there was so much, there were fruits, wonderful fruits, but Eve tried to eat one of them and she was thrown out, completely taken and said, you are outcast now, you can't live in the Garden of Eden. The contrast here is between an earth which tends to you and you tend to the earth, versus an earth which is tight-fisted. And the question before us, is our future connected to Sky Woman or is it connected to Eve? Are we being thrown out of the Garden of Eden? So that's what I'm going to talk about. Where do we go from here? All of you are young people. And on one side, there is great promise that there will be so many things. But on the other side, maybe there is great danger as well. And I want to talk about what you should be aware of. So we live in the age of disasters. Climate crisis is fast having an effect, faster and faster. The environment, air, soil, water, and oceans are degenerating. Species of all kinds are disappearing. Human societies are in turmoil with poverty, hunger, disease, sectarian and internecine violence, all increasing. You can see it all over the world now. The disparity between the haves and the have-nots has massively increased. Political systems are at breaking point. What kind of a future can we and our children and our grandchildren look forward to? I'm sure this question has arisen. I know young people of your age who have decided not to have children because they don't know what kind of world is going to be there. Over the last 3 centuries, humans have built up an attitude of arrogance that we can solve all problems. Irrespective of what is there that nature has, we think that we can solve all problems. But every solution, you look at every single solution in the last 300 years, whether it is of energy, of transport, of medicine, of anything, has created new, ever larger and more frightening problems. That the technology which is supposed to be this golden bullet has actually created most of the problems that we face today. Architecture and planning fields promised a better world. In the 1920s, 1930s, they were saying we are going to make a new world, we are the architects who will do it. But in fact, have only increased the destructive actions on lands, forests, water bodies, plants, living creatures, as well as all human beings. It's not such a happy picture. I know that I will be accused of being pessimistic, but I am speaking this from the position of optimism, hope, in the young who become aware of this and start building their lives in a new way. Technology without responsible ethical care for the world brought about this situation. Our confidence that we could master nature, this word has mastered the world, has proved hollow. Is it not time to reconsider the basis of present-day systems? This is the main question I'm asking. When we are thinking of the future, will it be just the same spiral zooming on, or we will stop and reconsider? To reconsider the philosophy, economics and politics of endless growth, endless exploitation of the earth, and exploitation of its creatures to exhaustion, and a total focus on material wealth that leads to this situation. This is the generation of Amazon, of continual buying. I don't know how many of you get online things delivered every day, most. And we consume more and more and more. And we want more and more material wealth. And this grabbing, this greed for more is part of what is called progress. So the story of man as master of the world, should we reconsider it? Are there any less destructive stories that tell of a more caring philosophy, a less exploitative economics, and a fairer politics? Should we remember the old indigenous stories? Should we build new, caring stories? Like the story of the sky woman, I wonder what kind of story we can create, which is as loving, as caring. You know what? This braiding sweetgrass, and this author says, braiding is an expression of love. When you do somebody's hair and braid it, you are showing love to that person. Your mother does it. We have to braid the fibers of the earth. So can architects be those loving mothers of a braiding of the many things of the earth? We need to build another narrative. A narrative of care and responsibility. Indigenous peoples all over the world, North and South America, Africa, South Asia, have a different notion of existence in the world. Our own tribals have wonderful stories. They considered that they were a part of a complex web of life. A web that allowed all to get just enough and allowing all forms to live in balance. That's what the indigenous thought is. Are we willing to think again? They considered themselves participants in the process of existence, not masters. This European notion of the object, the world as an object which I can deal with technology in whatever way I like, and I will find a solution to the problems that are created. That European notion is denied by the indigenous peoples. And they want to stop cutting off the forests. They want to stop mining. They want to stop all kinds of things. Are they more wise than us? Can we become participants again? So, I'll just bring out a few characteristics between the two major philosophical orientations. So, on the one side, I have participation. On the right hand side is mastery. Mastery, that is what happened in the colonial time in societies with technological power. It is the ideology of the powerful. The powerful. Not just in colonial times. Right up to now, all those who are powerful want mastery. And participation as a mode of action of indigenous peoples, of societies that depend on small-scale interaction with environment, it is the ideology of weakness, which considers to be weak, to be fragile, as a wonderful quality. Fragile, but still able to act. So on one side, mastery requires a hierarchical order. Humans, as the most evolved beings, most advanced, even amongst the humans themselves, some are considered primitive, Adivasi. So it's hierarchy. The indigenous knowledge systems consider non-hierarchy. All life forms are valid and different modes of human organization do not form a hierarchy. That this is a more advanced society. This is how the colonials, and Gayatri Spivak has written an article on worlding, in which she says the colonials carefully constructed this narrative saying you people are primitive. Then we want to be like the colonials. have as many machines, have as many material phenomena. We never said, yeah, we don't agree with you. Is it time to ask that question? Weakness is a natural state of all living beings. Strength is a human achievement. And I'm questioning whether we should build our societies, our architecture on the notion of strength. And the world is interconnected, inseparable. These are processes, not objects. All that is going on, the air, the materials, they're all passing through. They're processes. Whereas in the mastery conundrum, the world as distinct, definable, bounded objects in definite interactions, defined it. So you've got to put it in a test tube. You've got to define your building as that which ends there. The notions of time and of process. The colonial notion was built on progress, 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 progress. And see where we are. What all destruction we have done. And it's built on speed. In 1 second it should happen. And it's a pre-thought pattern. It's a creative. Time is a way of thinking of before and then implementing it. The indigenous peoples talked about constancy. Wherever the world, it will produce mangoes this year also, already the more is on the trees. Then next year, few months later, there will be no mangoes. And it will go on. The heat will come, the cold will come, rain will fall. It's constant. Constancy was their idea. And slowness, step by step. You try a little bit. You make a small mistake, you can change your method. Not all at one go. And irreversible. Which is what speed does. And the pattern emerges, is not imposed, is not created. This is very important for architects in terms of design principles. Notions of space. Modernism gave us this notion of universality, context-free. Whether you are building here, there, everywhere, this is the form that architecture will take. 1920 to 1950, 1970, and still today, buildings are meant to be universal, context-free. Whereas the indigenous societies created endless variants of contextual specificity according to the climate, according to the material, according to the skills. It was specific. Therefore, the idea of modern day thinking, of colonial thinking, of modernist thinking is uniformity. We want to create a society in which everyone is the same. Everyone wears the same suit. And everyone looks the same. You go to Japan, you will be aghast at what happens. Go in the morning to the railway station, all these hundreds of people looking absolutely the same. Everybody has a black suit. Everybody has a red tie and white shirt. And this is what modern day society would like us to be. Modular human beings who fit anywhere, who fit into. Yesterday, Tatiana Schneider was talking about the sausage making machine. She was talking about the university as the sausage making machine. So all sausages of the same size, same color, same taste will come out of that machine. You will be put in, and other spices such as knowledge will be put in, and you will come out as a sausage equal to any other sausage. And mastery requires single focused, centralized decision making. So space is thought of as like that. Whereas participation requires multi-centered, decentralized decision making. Human agency. The mastery mode requires certainty. If I do this, this must happen. If I do this, this must happen. Measurable equality and mastery. On the other side, in the participation mode, uncertainty is the basis. Just now I was talking to one young architect, and he said, I was never going to join architecture, except that some friend of mine was doing something and I got very fascinated. I had actually gone to give the IIT JEE exam, and I went into architecture. And I told him, the best things happen not when you are certain or you have planned for them. It's the accidents which give you the best things. And in your own lives, I challenge you, look at your own, what are the good things that happen to you? Most of them will have happened by accident and not by planning. And political and economic value. So, mastery requires centralized bureaucracies, large corporate systems, concentrated decision making, whereas participation depends on local democracy, small scale decision making bodies, power not concentrated. Mastery requires large scale financial actions. When I first came back to India from Africa, if you said 1 crore, 1 crorepati hai, 1 crore. Now today people bandy around hundreds or even lakhs of crores. Huge financial actions, which empower the managers. The people who gain from that are the managers. Their salaries are the highest. Whereas in the small scale, small and distributed financial arrangements. Finally, mastery looks at short-term outlook. Okay, do it now fast, and if it changes, we'll do something about it. Why am I on time? Is it okay? Just a few minutes more. Whereas participation requires the long-term outlook. That we are here for 3, 4, 5 generations. We are not thinking of 5 years from now. So all of this will require, if we decide to go towards the idea of participation as that which organizes all our actions, will require a radical change in our outlook, our economics, our politics, and of course, the way we do architecture. Because I am talking to a mainly young audience who are capable of going on to this adventure and take the risk of doing that, I am speaking these things. My generation is bygone generation. What are we? So, I'll read out some things which are written by a very fine economist at Oxford. She wrote a book called Donut Economics. And she said the world should be like a donut, where the inner circle is the spirit and the social patterns and the interactions between people. Outer circle should be the environment, and the donut is the interaction between these two. We should think about the world like a donut. We should think our lives like a donut. That everything that I do on this one, I increase my family size, it's going to have an effect on the environment, or environment does something, I have to change my relationships. So we should think about, and economics is the science which looks at this. So her 7 principles are, first, change the goal from GDP to the donut. GDP is the big word, no? Gross domestic product, which creates all kinds of, every time we waste something, that increases the GDP, because that is considered a domestic product. Waste is a very good way of increasing GDP. Or you dig some soil, that also is a good way. You cut a forest. Cutting a forest is a good way of increasing GDP. So instead of change the goal, don't think of GDP, think of the donut, the outer circle of environment, inner circle of your relationships. See the big picture, from the self-contained market to an embedded economy. You should read this book. Nurture human nature. She doesn't say anything about what tools we use, but she says nurture human nature from rational economic man to social adaptable humans. Get savvy with systems, from mechanical equilibrium to dynamic complexity. Design to distribute, not collect. Design to distribute. How do we design to distribute? That's a wonderful studio program, no? How do we do that? Create to regenerate. Create to regenerate, from growth to regenerate. Be agnostic about growth. Refuse to find any knowledge about growth. It doesn't matter. There may be growth, there may not be growth. Can we think of these same principles in relation to architecture? In the simplest possible way, some tips would be like this. Build less, reuse what we have, use materials that are available nearby, understand total systems. The work does not end at the boundary of your piece of land, because the air doesn't know that boundary. When we are burning stubble, the air will come through your boundary. So the work does not end at the boundary. Consider water, soil and rocks as gifts, not resources. Gifts. Take care to reduce waste and treat it to become useful material. This is the kind of process that I feel the future is calling for. Future is not calling for flashy pictures of endless human mastery, which equals endless human misery. Future is calling for a wise, a loving, caring relationship with everything that is around us. And if we can build cities and buildings in that way, can all of you who will be practicing architecture in a few years' time, can you find ways of making a caring architecture? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I request Principal Professor Meera Maligarkar, Professor Vinaz Ansari, and Assistant Professor Daksh Jain to come on the stage for the felicitation. Next we have Dr. Kailasa Rao. He is currently serving as the Director of School of Planning and Architecture in Bhopal and is a member of the National Monuments Authority under the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. He holds a PhD from Manipal University on architectural pedagogy from examples of traditional Indian temples and is a registered member of the Council of Architects, New Delhi. With extensive experience in digital documentation and heritage conservation. He has worked on various architectural and archaeological monuments across Karnataka. Dr. Rao has received numerous awards and grants for his research and has published several papers on architectural conservation and documentation techniques. He has presented his work at national and international conferences and has held academic positions at esteemed institutions such as Manipal Institute of Technology and RV College of Engineering. We request sir to please come on the stage and say a few words.
Technology comes with a lot of problems. Respected dignitaries of the dais, it was wonderful listening to Chaya sir. In fact, I could recollect very vividly one little talk when he came to Manipal a long time back. I just could understand the wittiness of this man in one small line. When sir was invited on the dais, my vice chancellor was little, he also tried to be little witty and said that, looks like the gentleman with the big beard seems to be a very knowledgeable person. So I think when Chaya sir took the mic and he said that, it looks like it is not the excessive growth of a facial hair on the face may not be indicative of a great knowledge, but certainly the loss of it on this head seems to be. My vice chancellor was a bald man. So I really privileged to talk in front of people like him and Purohit sir and all other my friends who are there in front of me. When you say about the reflections of future, reflections of what in the future is my question. I am from the background of heritage studies, and I see that today I am here because of what I did yesterday. It is my past which makes me be today here, and anything that I am going to be day after tomorrow will depend upon what I did 10 years back. I would really like to say that if you really have to plan for 100 years, well, you need to know what you were 1000 years back. Because I'm sure most of you must have seen Kantara. I am from that land of the South Canada, where we ask the past for the future problems and solutions, because past has immense knowledge which is there. So anything which has evolved over a period of time needs to be seen with a lot more respect and dignity. Before you lose it, perhaps you may have to rethink about it, whether you really understood it completely or not. So I'm mostly from the, as I told you, from the experiences of past I can talk about it. I'll just give a very small idea about how we learn about our own past. Towards the left side, I'm sure many of you might have seen, we used to use it as a, sometimes pillow or sometimes a dumbbell, that Bannister lecture. It talks about lots of things, so many hundreds and thousands of papers, works which are describes about the Western civilizations. When it comes to the East, very little seems to be there. I was quite touched by when Herbert Sproul says that the whole body of work which, of the world architecture seems to be, confined to the Western theories, but when it comes to the East, where there seems to be at least a few thousands of years back, there's a lot of work which has happened, but very little is attributed in that particular. Fundamentally, it might be a perceptual variation in terms of understanding these two phenomena. My own understanding is that what you see the left, Parthenon, Pantheon, or those things are drawing-based approaches. It is a construction by addition process. So there is a whole idea about to build, you need to add. But you see the right side one, the Ellora type, and maybe the genesis of it is creation by subtraction. You don't add to things creating. You separate the things by you see a stone, you see a beam there, or a column there, or a sculpture there. You just have to get rid of the things what you don't want to do. And then you see that one. I think there is a philosophical variation. That's why maybe perhaps West might not have seen our buildings as an architecture, but they are seen only as sculptures. But in my opinion, it is the ultimate way of creation. I mean, when I really look at a temple, somebody may say that, okay, what is there in terms of architecture? It is inside, it is a dark cell. It is, what is about it? It is the whole thing is a huge lump of mass, they may say that. It is not a space. But this is not something to do with, when you do this generation, it is not a creation. You generate spaces out of it. But if you really want to really talk about only architecture which is only what you call functional, very, very, sustainable or very efficient, I think the animals have surpassed us long time back. The birds have been building some kind of nest without any this thing. The ants build some of the most energy efficient things. But do you call it an architecture? I do not know. They are wired to think so. But have you ever seen any ant or an insect building a memorial for a dead father? I don't know. Whether they have invented a god, whether they have appreciated the thing and built a temple for it, I don't know. I don't know of women. I have not really seen it. We have been very anthropossessive. But the thing is that this whole part of creation for something supreme, I would say, is something beyond your physical needs, is an architecture or a creation part of it. So I just wanted to show a little bit of examples of it, how we can learn from the past, maybe some small little journey of my own, how I try to understand it in small little perspective of it, only just very physicality of it. I'm not even getting into philosophical part of it. And rather I would restrict myself to generation of the form or a geometry itself. It's a one iota of the whole body of knowledge, but yeah, if you really look at the complexity, you may appreciate it. So the left side what you see is a Udeshwar temple of Nilkant Mahadev in near Vidisha of Madhya Pradesh. Something very interesting, such a complex form, it is 28-sided star-shaped temple. And something very similar happens maybe around 1,800 kilometers away from there in a small little village, Haveri, in a Siddheshwar temple of Karnataka. Haveri, I don't know whether you might have heard about it, a small little one. There's a small miniature done, exactly some 28-sided cellular one. You can see the cursor. In fact, if I want to tell a miniature, just you can imagine what is the scale of this. Looking at the little bottle, you will understand that this is the kind of scale which they were explaining. How do you communicate? And this is, of course, your, our chandelas which were doing in Madhya Pradesh, and similarly in small little places in Tiruvallur, they were trying to replicate the idea. But in today's context, if I really have to explain this kind of a geometry, I may need thousands of drawings, because not two courses are same. This is if I just see that wire mesh frame of that one. Every line that you see is actually created, but you really do not have any particularly delicate drawing. How do you communicate such kind of complex ideas? One is to create an idea and communicate an idea. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing. So just restricted to, understanding the past and how do you, perhaps one small little way of looking at that kind of thing. So do they have any kind of a generative architecture? We are talking about AI, we are talking about, what do you call various form generative principles, various things that we are talking about it. But do they really have such kind of an ideas? Is the computers are the current generation's pride, or the computing as an idea was already there, was a question. I mean, this is the kind of question which my own guys, his son joined Zahar in his office. So they thought that they were in terms of a great generative architecture using various parametrics and other kind of things. So when my thesis was going on, when I showed this work to his son, Shaju Bhushan, who's an associate in AA now, and he said that looks like these guys know about a lot more about sweep geometry. They look like generate certain kind of things 1,000 years back. Every building that I'm showing is at least 1,000 years old. Well, little bit of journey of mine when I started my exploration and understanding heritage. Being a conservation architect, you cannot really take anything for guaranteed. That all lines have to be very carefully measured and see that they are right angle to the not, what is the reason, and as is varies. So most of this kind of initial levels of drawing that we were trying to document some of the temples. But when I did this elevation, I know how much we fooled ourselves. You really cannot actually draw it in as an elevation because it is never pursued as an elevation. It is only we were making a blocks and putting it together. It may look like a pretty drawing, but it wasn't. Just to understand the complexity of the as-is varies condition, because it may take 1,000 years for a pillar to bend some 10 degrees, maybe next 1 degree we may decide its future. So we have to be very accurate. So we used to measure everything with respect to tube levels, water levels, all those kind of things. For example, here you fix all the horizontals with the one perfect water tube level and measure everything top to bottom, so that you do not have to have one datum, one standard point from where you can measure it. So most of our field notebooks used to end like this, with hundreds and thousands of it, and used to take 6 months to just to document a temple as it is, kind of a thing. So, but then that kind of a approach, did give a little detailed insight into it. It is not the whole kind of a computing that today I use it as a, sometimes a little very, very glamorous, but this gave the idea. For example, at that point of time, maybe with the Sir's version was AutoCAD 2.1, maybe my version was in 93's versions were a little bit more release 14 kind of a thing. I found that it was much easier to create these models rather than drawing it. It was much easier to compute them using certain kind of a principles. So this kind of a things went on, and till then we didn't have a very precise kind of information. One little Talakad Kirtanara temple, when it did very precisely for 6 months, log it out, we saw a pattern. I could see a pattern that is the way that you offset it, there is certain kind of a pattern that it creates. And there is a definite madness in the method. There is nothing seems to be accidental. There is a very well thought process, but that still was a sort of a idea. So perhaps, as I told you, it was much easier for me to look at these things as a. I think it is not working. No, it has some sort of an animations which is not working. So it was much easier for me to compute the model in a system. But does it mean that those who are doing 1,000 years back were using any computational design? I'm not very sure. They knew computation. They were not using computers. They didn't have AutoCAD, but they had a little gray matter which they were quite using it. And it has come from generations of an understanding. But the contemporary understanding of looking at the kind of documentation I saw either was too fast from the or too schematic from the European time, or sometimes these kind of a Facebook forwards or some sort of a WhatsApp forwards trying to say that it is a very conceptual idea. But I don't think if you give a conceptual idea anybody can build it, because you have some 300 to 400 sculptors who have to be given a definite idea. There is no way that you can join two stones and if it doesn't belong to that particular place. Everything has got a definite location, place. They're not replaceable certain kind of things. Yeah, but then I also know that the reality is that somewhere it has been codified into this kind of a text. We only were talking about it as a demonstration. I was not very sure how much you can understand as a demonstrability. So those are the things I was wondering. I mean, this led to certain kind of celebration. Some people said that, it is all in the mandalas and all this thing, but then I said that it's fine as an idea, but how do you really translate it? How do you communicate to this thing? Because actual construction sites are like this. One of these abandoned sites which I see, you can see that no two stones are same. Every stone is different. Every stone has got to go into such a particular location. If it's not anything like, you can, like a brick, you keep on adding and then plaster it will become something. If there's a little problem in the plastering, you can cover it with the putty. If there's a little bit of problem, you can cover it with the paint. It is not like that. You have to be very precise and everything has to be interlocked. There's no mortar used. It's all very, like a car engine, I would say. I do have gone through this phase of it. The scholarly attitude has been two distinct approaches. One used to feel that, okay, what does that man who's sitting in this reading a tidy, a Brahmin who understands this language of the stone. The other scholarly attitude was that, okay, what does this person who's cutting the stone about the science and knowledge about this, such a complex geometry? I was of this, whether it's almost a question is to cut it, whether it's a practice first or a theory first. I was of the second school of thought earlier. Because I was arrogance of learning from the drawing, drafting kind of things, and that, this is how it is. Now of late, I am slowly converting myself to know there is a knowledge which happens, and then this is a byproduct of it. But not just based upon my assumptions. The early works of Professor Adam Haddy's work has been quite inspiring, but it gave only an idea about classification and proliferation of these particular ideas. Remember, these are not, you never see the name of an architect there. At the most, sometimes a little bit of a mason's mark. So unlike the Western, this thing with Rizvi and other kind of thing, we do not seems to have projected a great master. It's a collective thought. This is somebody is carrying an information which has been passed on to them from generation, and they are taking to the next generation. It is not a reproduction, let me tell you. No two temples next to each other are same. There's a lots of things if you have an eye to see into the details of it. Other works of Professor Meister I also see, who seems to believe that there is a 8 by 8 grade, 9 by 9 grade, but certain kind of dimensionalities of it, looking only from physical aspects of it. Well, it helps in terms of diagnosis, but in terms of a certain conclusion, I'm not very sure whether these approaches will lead you. There is a tonic value to it, but how do you explain this little small, 2 centimeters by 30 centimeters, a small list which seems to be at the bottom level here, is not an accident, but it is part of the creation. It is a very intended thought. The stone has been cut and put into certain kind of this. This even made the puzzle much more very interesting for me. So what is this whole methods of it? Well, my area of thing is that I restricted myself initially with this part of it, which covers part of Maharashtra, mainly Karnataka and parts of Andhra, which is between 9th to 11th century works of Kalyani Chalukyas. But then once you understand one aspect of it, I could realize that there is a huge chain of things which can happen in various parts of this country, whether it is Varatas of far eastern side, or Kalingas of certain areas, or deep down south, or northern side. So I had an opportunity to see this thing. I had a little grant to do a survey of it, and this was one of those kind of what we call it as a Vesara. This binaries are little tricky, calling Nagara, Dravida is little too binaries, I would say. This country has a lot more understanding of these things, and these are one raga can be done in certain ways, in northern side, the eastern side, western side, and each gharana can even take it to certain level, and a great master can take it to the next level also. So there are things like you have to see from these kind of perspectives. So these are some of the works. Another type of a Jaina temple in a Lakundi area. Very interesting kind of a typology, which is around 24-sided stellar typology. The Doddabasappa temple in Dambada area in Karnataka. Most probably, perhaps, initiative ideas of the Bhumis or the later stages by Paramaras, or some of the wells which were so exquisitely done. It was like a well, it was a sort of a unfolding of temple and subterranean structure kind of a thing. They seems to have a mastery of whole thing, and they never fail to in the current days of a situation where a building shelf life is over in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whereas some of these structures are awe-inspiring for 1,000 years. Even you go to 10 times, 100 times, you find something new about it, something to learn about it. So what is this timelessness of it? What is this madness toward the precision? Nobody is going to ask you whether it has to be that kind of level of precision. Who is asking you to get that kind of perfection? But he still does it. You can see the sharp lines between the columns. I'm sure if it is little blunt, nobody is going to look at it. But what is your self-dedication to it, to do a perfection of it? In fact, this particular architect, I saw the Sthapatis, there is a little inscription which says that who has got masters in some 7 different types of genres, and a certain number of villages were given as a grant. So this is a kind of a work that we see. Now, question is that we saw various things. And most of the times it was an art historian's approaches or various things. But architecturally, how did they generate it? How did they conceive the idea, convey the idea, construct that idea was the thing. If I really look at the whole thing as an architecture, your conceptualization to realization is what we do. Now, what are those ways of conceptualizing? To do that one, the first thing was to do a very systematic documentation. Well, this was some kind of a sort of parallel photography at those point of times, around 15, 16 years back I was trying. Well, then you realize that, okay, fine, it's very difficult to really capture these dimensions and totality or indirect. So, we did some other techniques of, photo, sort of initial levels of photo mapping kind of a thing, more with the parallel photography. And then, remember, most of the time when your teachers also ask, okay, plan hai, all elevations है, section है, ठीक है, तो building समझ में आ जाएगा. I put all 4 elevations in 4 sides. It looked really like a joke for me because it is not actually put all 4 elevations. It doesn't look like a building. Building doesn't have an elevation, or it doesn't know that it has an elevation. You have to conceptualize it and look at it from that perspective. So when I really deleted our text as I realized it is actually I'm trying to make a fool of myself. It is not really trying to look at it. Rather, it was trying to look at from the perspective of how do you make it. The process of creation was you move a certain kind of a profile in a certain direction and a certain kind of things are created. For example, these things may look like the same if I look at an elevation exactly the same, but when I created it was a little different. So to understand it, I started scanning them. I had an understanding, but I had to ratify whatever I knew. So whatever that has to be there, how to validate this whole theory. Whether there is a whole way of creation, not by addition, but by a sweep geometry. There are various kind of strategies that they were doing. More and more I got into a little more this mind of nitty-gritties, kind of some sort of results rather, whatever I could see that it seems to be a certain pattern to level of understanding how this line becomes flattened after a certain time. I see that one. That was each course level of it. To tell certain basic idea about it, Indian temples, at least if I want to talk about Karnataka or down south part of it, they are taught in configuration, never talked about as an elevation or a section, they are called as a configuration. How is the horizontal configuration? And Talamana, that is what is the configuration, that is a vertical kind of thing. So, there is a very interestingly, there is a certain kind of the word is a configuration also very loosely told about it. It is about a certain kind of a thing which are relatable to what do you call it? If you understand the phonetics of Indian language, you may try to get into it. There is a way that you can describe a certain kind of a stanza which has to have certain things like whether it is a it has a certain kind of a configuration. Those who understand like Paranabharava or this Alankaras, Utpalamala, Champalamala, there is this way that it talks about whole configuration only, and then you put in your words into it and try to make a poem out of it. There has to be make a perfect sense of it. So these are the things. So my way of looking at it was that okay, fine, first to see that whether I can create a parts using a small component, and then whole also using a part. That was an idea. So you just using one profile, when I create it, it became a kuta. When I elongate it with another part, it became a shala. I'll So then when I expand these things into Puta and Shala and the Panjara, which are basically your building blocks with which you can understand it, then you can really look at into the next level of it. So most of the things are done at this level, and then later the detailing can happen. Whether these are all, whether it can become balas or whether it can become a lion or a tiger, all those details. Entire thing is going to be adorned with so many stories what they know. Whether it's a Jain temple or a Hindu temple, Shiva temple, Vishnu temple, that doesn't really matter for them. But later stages, these kind of embellishments can happen. Directional symbology plays a certain kind of a role. So none of my videos are playing. I'm sorry for that. Yeah. Is there any way that these are also video? Anyway, so first number one is that how do you assess it? I think those who have done the documentation might be a little idea to it. If this is at the scale of object and this is the complexity of the object. For example, if it is the number of measurements, I could say complexity, and this is a scale. If it is 1 meter by 1 meter and it has got up to 10 dimensions or 100 dimensions, your manual drafting might be very effective. Suppose if it is 10 meters by 10 meters, but you really have to do something like a 10,000 measurements, you may have to go to terrestrial photogrammetry or lidar kind of. If something is very large and very complex, maybe you may have to go to the airborne, this kind of thing. These are modern tools which are available. Most of the people will think that I am a techie and get into modern these things and do some kind of thing. No, this is my Mazguri thi, because the kind of a complexity that I need to understand, my methods were not helping. So I needed to resort to some sort of a technological approaches, which are known as tachymetric kind of a things. You put a laser and you get a very, very detailed information. When you don't have it, you have to have some jugaad methods. I mean, there were times that I used to get a grant when there was no grant. I used to take my small Xbox. I don't know whether you still use it for your gaming console. So, I mean, you work in an overnight because it works very well with the infrared kind of a thing. You start getting some sort of information like this. I'm very sorry, this system में कोई भी ये नहीं चल रहा है मेरा वीडियो से. What is it? नहीं वीडियो ऐसा है, पूरे वीडियो से है. Okay, this system may not do it like that. कौन सा Windows कौन सा वर्जन है ये? Maybe older version है. ठीक है, I'll stick to this thing. It is yeah. So these were the kind of a thing. So first time we're not looking at a building like a plan elevation or section. We're documenting in totality. These are all 3D objects which you can rotate. You can see that one and all this. So next level was something like that. Of course, Maniarsan maybe the latest versions of these technologies. I started much earlier, perhaps maybe release 2000, not release 2002 version category we are. So that was the thing, but of course I could really show the details of this one. So we started looking in totality because no two edges you are assuming in straight lines, you try to take intermediate points. It's a huge large point cloud data that we can really have it. I really wish I could show the further details of it. So you start collecting the information of every surface without any assumption. There is a reduction of a human bias in it because when I measure it, sometimes I take and sometimes